6.5%, was it? Is that what the current odds are of the Stanley Cup?
Well, and if you look at the round-by-round progression, the Stanley Cup favorite is the Vancouver Canucks.
Like, what a time to be alive!
Talking you through every goalie controversy, scoring slump, and draft lottery bust, this is the C4 Podcast on CanucksHockeyBlog.com. Here they are, the best starting lineup we could afford under the salary cap. Chris, Matt, Anna, and Adam.
Welcome to another episode of the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast. I'm Chris at Lightforce, joined virtually, not by my regular co-hosts, Anna Forsyth at A403, Matt Lee at _61, and Adam Obanel Carter at Adam FCOC. No, I gave the three of them a night off. I am instead joined by two of the most famous Canadians.
Oh, God.
That I know.
That you know. Okay.
That I know.
I'm glad you clarified that.
I'm joined by the hosts of the Dark Poutine podcast, which you've heard me talk about on Off the Rails. Mike Brown, Scott Hemingway. I could also consider them my friends, although I don't know if I can say that because...
Let's not get carried away.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to elevate myself in the grand scheme.
You go right ahead and elevate. I need all the friends I can get.
Yeah, no, you're a good friend, bud.
So, but for those wondering how we got connected, well, we used to work for this local family outfit, and yeah, we've sort of gone different ways since then. But
I guess it's kind of like we're kind of like war buddies, like Nom buddies, it's like we've been to Nom.
Well, Canucks pay-per-view nights, let me tell you.
Oh my God! Oh, if we can talk, holy shit! Oh man,
or the UFC, yeah.
I had to. Well, UFCs never went down though; those were always smooth. But I was like the champion, like a couple of nights or for a year. Like I was the night guy, so I had to be responsible for those Canuck pay-per-views. And God, well.
Yeah, I think, on this podcast, I believe there have been a few times where I've referred to Canucks pay-per-view in not the best light. And not that the games themselves were problematic, but having worked for this local family company, let me tell you, there were some very upset people that used to, come through the storefront to let the staff know all about the previous
Why do I see a black screen? Why is there a black screen on channel 301?
I specifically remember a game. I don't remember the game, but a game, third period, and it was like a tied game. Like it was a good game, and like the third period's 2 minutes in, and I'm the one who's responsible for tech support to manage the pay-per-view, like manage the messaging and stuff. And so I'm just sitting there, I'm watching it because I'm like the whole time you're like, oh please don't go out, oh please don't go out. Third period, 2 minutes in, tie game, heated game. Pay-per-view goes black, and it takes a second for you to see the call volume just max out, and you just all of the reps on the floor literally stand up and turn to me and like, what do we do? And so I'm calling I don't even remember what it was called, but I was calling down to the technical, like, what's going on, what's happening, and trying to find out what's happening. And then it stayed out, and I've got all the reps asking me, what do I tell them? What? Everybody's mad. And I had to be like, you know what? Like, you have to think in that moment. And I'm like, okay, you know what? 1/3 of the pay-per-view has gone. Or, 1/3 of the pay-per-view is gone. So tell people you'll give them a 1/3 credit. But, and I put that in the but, if you think the right thing to do is to credit the whole thing, I empower you. I guess everybody forgot that second part, and we're just telling customers, they'll give you 1/3. And then I remember listening to talk radio the next morning, and it was a topic on talk. And then they offer one. How ridiculous is that? And I'm thinking I'm going to come in and get my ass chewed off. But I came in, and my boss at the time was like, "Thank you for making a decision and trying. We shouldn't have left you alone." But it's like you have PTSD with that shit.
Yeah, I if I remember correctly, I think the game you were talking about was against the Detroit Red Wings. I would have been in loyalty at the time, which always meant the following day.
Oh my God.
I honestly don't know what was worse in loyalty. The day after a Canucks pay-per-view or Novus flyering the downtown area. Yeah, either one of them just was not fun for me. But no, we're not here to talk about the local family outfit the three of us used to work for.
No.
I thought I'd get the three of us together to talk about the Vancouver Canucks, because if there's one thing that our listeners know is that generationally, I remember an era of the Vancouver Canucks that the other co-hosts, well, let's just say, weren't around for. And I thought it would be nice to get a couple knowledgeable people, and again, the most famous Canadians that I know, to join me as we venture down memory lane. Now, we're not going to spend all our time reminiscing. We're just going to spend most of it. We'll touch on a little bit of what went on over the course of the past year, as I'm an avid listener of your podcast, and I know there was an episode where you were actually talking about being interested again, and that may be related to the fact there wasn't much else on TV at the time, but I think, it's worth a conversation, and I do want to get in a little bit into your podcast, so we'll do that too. That's all coming up on the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast, is heard on CanucksHockeyBlog.com and the Full Press Coverage Network. Before we hit the record button, I'd sort of, we would run through like, hey, what are we going to talk about here? And Scott, you said 1994. And not going to lie, I have memories of 94. I will always have memories of 94. I can tell you like how my entire day went.
Yes.
Against Game 7 New York Rangers. Like, right from the moment I woke up into the morning until I actually put my head on the pillow at night. And the number of minutes I spent cursing the name Nathan Lafayette. Like, that's...
Hit the post, Game 3, third period, hit the post. I think it was the third period. But yeah. I'm exactly the same. That whole run, I can almost remember every game, what I was doing, who I was with. It was just, it was incredibly magical. And, it was really just... It was a big moment in my life. Maybe that says a lot more about my life than it does about hockey. But
a question I actually have for Mike is, knowing that you originally were on the East Coast and you've now come to the West Coast, were you here by then? Like, that part I'm not sure timeline wise. Like, were you?
I was actually a Canucks fan since I was a kid.
Oh, really? So, okay, I have to ask, how'd that happen?
So growing up in Nova Scotia, my uncle lived here in Vancouver, and my mom and dad brought my sister and I out here when I was 6 years old for a veterinary conference, because my dad was a veterinarian. And, my uncle Don was a little bit into hockey, but because the Vancouver Canucks were the only place that I had ever been where there was an actual NHL team. I didn't see a game because I was here during the summer. Yeah. I just had this affinity for the Canucks from that point on. So I used to watch Canucks games on a little CRT TV, black and white, with a bent antenna, late into the night because of the 4-hour time difference. So I was watching games until like 11:30 midnight, even later than that. Yeah. Back in Nova Scotia, because I was a Canucks fan. I was cheering for the Canucks. So yes, I have been a fan for almost all my life.
See, okay, I will admit, I kind of find that surprising. Most people I know that I would say come from away, although come from away is when you arrive on the Rock and from somewhere else, but from the East Coast, tend to either be a Maple Leafs fan or a Montreal Canadiens fan.
Not true.
Not true. Okay, because I know a very small sample.
Nova Scotia is also full of a lot of, and I hate to say this, Boston Bruins fans.
Oh, I knew it when I went to Halifax. I could smell it in the air when I was there, and I just didn't know it.
Yeah, and we don't apologize for it. I mean, Brad Marchand's from Nova Scotia. So.
Sure. Well, and I guess, if we think geographical distance, the Eastern Seaboard is a lot closer than what we would know as the Ontario Panhandle or...
And I went to high school with Glenn Murray, who played on the Bruins. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
Well, thinking, as sort of these long time Canucks fans, like 94 was the first time that I can recall having any form of optimism about the organization. And the funny thing is they weren't really that good of a team going into the playoffs in 94.
Oh, yeah.
right? They were a better team in the sort of early 90s. Like when Trevor Linden arrived, late 80s, that's when we started to see that team develop. But for one reason or another, be it the trade that Pat Quinn made to bring in the likes of Cliff Ronning and Jeff Courtnall and Jeff Brown and what have you to that roster, or just the fact that they were able to beat a significantly favored Calgary Flames team in the first round, and suddenly, we can beat anyone, right?
And I think, if I remember correctly, too, it literally came down to the final game of the season to determine if we made it into the playoffs or not. And so, like, it was really, the team's success throughout the regular season was not steady or stable.
Oh, no.
But I think a large part is what you talked about. I think it was knocking out the number one Flames in the first round, and in such a dramatic way, constant double overtimes, constant back and forth. That Kurt McLean, the save. Oh my God.
Double pad stack. Yeah.
Oh my God. The toe off his toe. Like, I think getting through a playoff series like that when you're not supposed to be there, period, I think that really connected and bonded the team. I think they really were able to be like, well, hey, we just beat the number one team, and we did it, and we didn't luck into it. We had to fight tooth and nail, and we did. I think that really helped kind of develop a really tight bond between them all.
And it rallied the fans too. I think that we just expected them to go out. They'll okay, they made it, hooray! But they'll just go out. And then when they didn't, it's like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, there's this little spark of hope, and it's like, maybe this is the year finally.
I can still almost name everybody from that team. Oddly, I don't even know if I can tell this story, but like I had a conversation a year or two ago with one of the 94 Canuck players. And it was fascinating because he was also, let's say, on the coaching side of things in 2011.
Okay.
And I remember asking him what to him was more, what are his memories more favorable of? Like, when he thinks back to the 94 run as a player, or thinking to the 2011 as a coach, he said that he only thinks positively about 94. He is very frustrated with the 2011, and he made it very clear as to why. And he had said that a decision was made in Game 7, and I think there was a key decision that was made in regards to who's going to go in net, and a decision was made that was not the decision everybody else wanted, and so he very much felt that if the decision that everybody wanted would have been made, they would have won the cup. And so he was pretty frustrated with that one was our cup. We were supposed to win that one, and we could have won that one. Whereas the other one was just, we weren't supposed to do anything. So anything that we did accomplish was just, icing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, comparing like 94, that blue collar team, even their white collar players, like Pavel Bure, he was a nasty piece of business when he wanted to be. Like, he played a blue collar style of game when need be. Granted, he didn't generally come past the red line onto the defensive side of the ice, but I distinctly remember after the Vancouver Canucks lost to New York in Game 7, which again, they were in it right to the end.
Yeah.
Do I go to the parade? Like, because they had a parade. They had a sort of a thank you to the Canucks, a thank you to the fans that wound up at BC Place. And I'm like, do I skip school to go to the parade? I think I should.
Yeah.
I didn't, but I thought about it. Yeah. And you look at 2011. Yeah, there was no parade. Like 2011, The Vancouver Canucks in 2011, yeah, you're right. They were destined to win the cup. In fact, the way it was trending, everyone had them pegging the cup 4 straight against the Boston Bruins, and they won the first 2 games. So the prophecy is true. And then suddenly, if the Vancouver Canucks were to lose a game, it was a combination of we can't score a goal and our goaltender can't stop them.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
And then we put in the backup and rallied, tied up the series, I believe, and I can completely understand the goaltending decision. I think it's always easy on the outside to criticize, but you've got your backup in, and you've got your number one. So if you go with your backup, which you're more confident in, you think, well, this will give us a better shot potentially. And you win with your backup, you've just lost your number one goalie. There's no way that goalie comes back the next season. This is the person you have the entire team rallying around, everybody's in love with. And so not playing that goalie, you've essentially said, we're done with you. And so, as a coach, I can understand if you, and it's not like putting him back. It's not like he's a terrible goalie. He was still amazing. He just had a bad couple of games. And so I can understand that feeling of, well, this is our number one guy. I have to go with him. But on the flip side, I can also understand why everybody else might have felt we should have gone. What's most important is winning the cup. That's the priority, is winning the cup, and we need to go with who's going to give us the best chance. It's not an easy decision, so I can't say one was right or one was wrong. Would have liked that cup, but yeah,
it is what it is. And the worst part about it is how the Vancouver Canucks have a history of getting to the Stanley Cup final and then proceeding to hit maybe not rock bottom, but try to get as close as possible. Like I look at 95 and how they brought in Alex McGillney, and then eventually Messier comes on and you go, oh my God, this Vancouver Canucks team is going to be so good. And yeah, those were some dark years.
They really were.
Like I just
era. No, that was
what the hell is Messier doing here? It's like, isn't he part of that scar that we're trying to overcome? It's like, oh, let's just rub some Messier salt into the 94 wound.
Well, okay, and the backstory on the Messier acquisition was the Vancouver Canucks had made a heavy play to get Wayne Gretzky, and they were close. And the story goes, Pat Quinn went and took the screws to Gretzky and his agent, saying, "Hey, we think we can get you for this." And Wayne's like, "Yeah, sorry, that's not going to happen." Having missed out on a superstar in Wayne Gretzky, John McCaw, the eventual owner of the Vancouver Canucks, having now bought out the Griffiths family, he felt that it would be important to make a splash. And, if you can't get Wayne Gretzky, get Mark, because he was totally the same player that not only, helped the Edmonton Oilers win in the early 80s, but also helped win a cup in New York. Oh, wait. The Rangers played the Canucks and won that cup? Oh, I didn't know. I wasn't a hockey fan back then.
Yeah.
I'm not bitter.
I heard, I remember one of my old jobs, I worked graveyard. And so I was always listening to talk radio throughout the night on my headphones. I remember an interview with Pat Quinn talking about the Gretzky trade. You always have to take with a grain of salt what people are saying on the radio. But what he had said publicly, during this radio show, was that he's like, we were told it was a lock with Gretzky. We had made him an offer. They would counter offer. We were going back and forth, and they had set a date. This is, if we can't get it done by this date, it's not happening. And so, right down to the wire, Gretzky and his manager were like, this is it. You give us this, and we're signing with you. And so the Canucks went back, and Pat Quinn and everybody talked about it, and they were like, okay, let's do it. And so they went back to Gretzky, where it's like midnight's like the deadline. They went back to him at 11 and hey, but he wouldn't answer his phone. He didn't answer the phone. They kept calling. They called his manager, calling everybody. Nobody's answering the phone. Gets past midnight. They keep calling. They're calling all through the night. And I think he said at 12:30 or 2 in the morning. I'm not too sure exactly the time. Gretzky finally answered, and he was just like, you're calling and waking me up? Like, how disrespectful of you guys. Like, this isn't the kind of team I want to be with, and we're not doing this deal. And Quinn said that he firmly believed it was all just about leveraging our offer I can't remember who he signed with, but it was just about leveraging our offer to
That
get
might
a
have been
better.
the St. Louis deal.
I think it was, yeah, I believe it was the same.
Or was that a trade? So long ago.
But Quinn, like even in the interview, he was just beyond pissed. He was like, I felt absolutely robbed and led. Like he told us if we can offer him this, he's going to sign with us. We called him to offer. He didn't have any intention to. He was just using us as leverage to get a better deal with St. Louis, and he seemed really bitter about it. But the reasoning Gretzky said, I was so interested. I was going to sign with you guys, but if you're so rude to call me at this time of the night, I can't work with this organization.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the story that Gretzky tells is a slightly different spin. Is that the Canucks tried to come back, and I'll bet you, obviously, the truth is somewhere in the middle. The Canucks were probably finally, calling him to late. Meanwhile, Gretzky and his agent would have been Michael Barnett, I think, at the time, probably were using it for leverage. Right. And what ends up happening? He goes elsewhere. The Canucks get Messier, and the team goes kaput for a good spell.
Those were dark days, man.
Oh man! Heck, as the story goes, can't remember the guy's his name was, I think Steven Bellringer, I think was what his name was. He was like he worked for like BC Hydro or some crazy company, like no sports management experience. He's been put in charge of the sports operation, fires Pat Quinn, realizes everything that Pat Quinn does as GM or president or whatever the heck his title was at the time, calls Pat up and says, actually, could you come back and work for us on a contract instead? Because we need to figure this out. We don't know what to do. And Pat, quite rightly told him to go and stick his head probably somewhere that one might have medical problems with. Yeah. But, sort of looking back at that era or even before, who would have been your favorite player? Like if you had to pick one, and there are obviously a big number of big names, who would have been your favorite player at that time?
Mike, how about you? You go first.
Oh, I was a Bure guy. Mm-hmm. I really loved to watch that guy play. He was so fast. I just like that, he's a star, but like you mentioned before, he played with a bit of an edge. He wasn't afraid to get dirty if he needed to. He wasn't like, Don Cherry would say about the Europeans. He wasn't somebody who would just run away and let the Canadians handle things for him. He would get in there. So yeah, he was kind of my guy in that era anyway. But I've had as far as Canucks players go, I'm still a Naslund fan.
Oh, Nazi. So I knew Nazi was leaving Vancouver before it was public knowledge. I can't explain why, because I'm not entirely sure if I'm allowed to quite yet. But the two of you could probably, connect the dots based on what it was that I did at that family outfit, and in turn, what probably took place before said move. Yeah, just if you get what I'm throwing down.
I'm picking up what you're putting down, Chris.
Yeah. But Scott, how about you?
So my favorite to watch was hands down Bure. Loved him. But my favorite Canuck of that era was Linden. He was the epitome of hockey. Game 7 against the Rangers is the perfect example. We lost 3-2. He got both goals. You see him; he's limping. If I remember correctly, he's got a black eye. He's got like a huge cut and bleeding. Like he was the epitome of hockey. Nice, respectful guy, well thought of by everybody. Hard, bloody working player, talented and humble. Like he's just everything you ever want in a hockey player.
He really was captain's captain. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was also. No, go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, like, he was even the players' negotiating agent during the strike. Like, he was the one who was for the players union. He was the spokesman for the players union during the strike, so he was, the players universally loved him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was going to say I can completely see what you're saying in that he was sort of the hockey players captain. Like he left everything on the ice during the '94 series, and the Jim Robson call of he'll play, he'll play, and he'll play in Game 7 for the Stanley Cup. I was going to say how respectful he was, as I had an opportunity to man the phones for a Canucks for Kids telethon night, and the phones weren't working. Essentially, I was a paid actor. They were like, if the camera's on, make it look like you're answering the phones. We're piping and ringing. But it was awkward. So I'm doing all this and I'm making it look good. And then I guess apparently I did such a good job. A few others actually thought, oh, they fixed the phone. So that guy seemed like I was talking like I worked in a call center. So I totally knew how to play the call center up, right? So one of the women's recording is like, hey, would you like to meet Trevor? And I'm like, oh my God, I would have been like in my late 20s, 30s at the time. And I'm just like, oh my God, like he's my hero. And he comes up, he's like, hi, I'm Trevor. Like, I wouldn't know who he is. I'm like, I'm Chris. It's, such a pleasure to
Trevor,
meet you.
Do?
Yeah. And he's like, oh no, the pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this. You don't understand how much this means to the organization and means to me personally. And I'm like, no, Trevor, thank you. And I'm like trying to thank him for memories and all of that. And he's like, oh, you don't need to thank me. I did that because I enjoyed doing it. And, the least I can do is he's just so humble. It's a shame that his tenure with the Vancouver Canucks in the current era came to the end that it did. Obviously there was more to that story that we may learn at some point, but we've talked about this on our podcast previously. Trevor Linden has such a reputation in Vancouver that he could, put on a Boston Bruins jersey and hold the Stanley Cup above his head doing so, and people would be like, he deserved it. Like that. That's
it's true. You don't see that a lot in a lot of sports, where often when somebody, you can use LeBron as a good example, when he gets traded and comes back, the original team typically will boo. It was provided it was like, the player whose decision it was and stuff. They get booed and heckled and all that. There's the odd player when they come back to their original team. As soon as they hit the ice or the court, the audience still erupts in excitement, and they, just to show respect. And that was Trevor.
The first year Trevor was playing with the Canucks, I was living with a Canucks family, which is interesting. Back in Nova Scotia, when I was going to the Nova Scotia Community College, I was taking architectural drafting and design in Middleton, Nova Scotia. And so I needed a boarding house to stay at. And Mom and Dad found this boarding house, and they were this really nice couple, and their son played hockey. And I was just like, oh, who's this? Who's this guy? I walk into the house, and here's these World Juniors trophies and like all this, a big Russian hammer and sickle flag in the house, and this weird shrine. And then I see pictures of this goaltender. It was Troy Gamble. So,
sweet.
Yeah, so I lived with Troy Gamble's parents in 88 to 90, actually. So,
that is so cool.
So I got to hear some cool Canucks insider information, and Pat was Troy's mom. She just loved Trevor. She called him Trevor. She just loved him. She thought he was going to be a big star, because it was his first year, and he certainly was. So, it was kind of cool to hear things about the Canucks kind of inside as a fan as well.
Now, that kind of makes me think, as I'm curious, because in Vancouver, and this is the only place I've ever lived, Trevor Linden, you can mention to almost anybody, of a certain age, maybe not somebody like my daughters won't know who he is, but to a lot of the population are going to know who he is. Outside of Vancouver and outside of Canada, I'm going to hazard to guess. I can talk to a hockey fan in Buffalo, a hockey fan for a long time, and mention Trevor Linden. I suspect they probably won't. But who? I don't.
Well, I wonder. So first and foremost, part of it is era. Like, you sort of brought up your your daughters, and if you were to ask them, they might not know. That's a generational gap. Obviously, it's going to exist. I don't know. I think if people were to be asked, if you know a Vancouver Canuck, like an old Vancouver Canuck, I think Trevor Linden is probably one of the more recognizable. It would be him, Kirk McLean, Pavel Bure. And the thing about Bure is, he existed in Vancouver and New York and in Florida, but he really, he kept to himself. He didn't really want to do anything beyond what he needed to do on the ice, and that was it. Kirk McLean, he had his moment to shine in Vancouver. That was it. Trevor traveled, and he was recognizable. So I would question that. I think people would.
Well, I hope so. Yeah, like
maybe
I
know Trevor,
he was,
and definitely in Medicine Hat.
God, yeah.
Definitely outside of Vancouver, Medicine Hat for sure.
Solid point, Chris. And I hope he would be. Like, I would love for him to be. I was just in my head, it would be like, I'm just thinking, like, that would be sad if he's not really known in the hockey community at large.
Yeah. I got a question for you guys. I know this is kind of way off what we're talking about. Who do you guys, each of you, I'll start with Chris, who was the most frustrating Canucks hockey player ever to you? The most frustrating
ever. So, like, for one of the most frustrating for me would be Roberto Luongo, and I liked Roberto Luongo as a Vancouver Canuck, and I think the last NHL work stoppage and sort of his transition and release of his personality on social media is what really opened my eyes to him as a player. Prior to that, it would have been hands down. It would have been Roberto Luongo. I think Alex McGillney probably would be the player that may have frustrated me the most. He came in the prime of his career. He mailed it in. Yep. And he's also attached to an era that's obviously dark. Mark Messier, but not for anything more than just what he represents in the Canucks uniform. It's a good question.
What about you, Scott?
Oh boy. So goalies come to mind a lot. I think for me, Felix Potvin was a real.
The cat.
That was one that was really, and it's not none of these names I'm mentioning are a personal thing. Like, I thought they were just idiot. Like, Potvin was he came at a time as well where he was still quite a good goaltender, and there was a lot of expectation, and they didn't really pan out. And so I found him to be a very frustrating person to have on the team, because it's one of those where in your mind you're like, he's better than this. What's happening? And that's very frustrating. I loved him, but Cloutier.
Yeah, he's mine.
I think a lot of that might have to do with the team around him and everything. But it was another one where you would see these moments of brilliance.
Yeah,
it could be like a month of brilliance, and you're just like, okay, I get it now. Yeah, we could do big things with this guy. And then you'd have some moments or periods of time where a shot from the parking lot would get through Cloutier, and all of that positive, yes, we can do it with this guy, is suddenly like, oh no. And again,
it was a real love-hate thing, and I think that's what made him so frustrating. Is you love him 1 minute, and then you hate him the next. There are some that you just consistently loathe, but but with him, it was just like, he's so hopeful, and then what's he doing?
And then what Chris had mentioned with McGillney, again, because that was, if I remember correctly, he had like a 75-goal season with the Canucks. I remember he had like an outstanding season or two, but again, there's just that inconsistency.
Yeah. He did have in his first season with Vancouver Canucks, he was as advertised, but I've always had an issue with players that, whether my perception is right or wrong, have made it apparent that they don't want to be here, and he felt like one of them.
That's exactly it. That's exactly
I get that feeling with Louis Eriksson right now. Like, what that guy?
Yeah, as longtime listeners of our podcast know, we currently have Louis riding the bus in Utica next season. So Yeah, no, he signed a contract, he got paid, and now he's just, waiting for retirement to kick in, where most players go, Arizona or Florida.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's, I bet you Eriksson, that's the modern area equivalent of who frustrates fans the most.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. You just watch, there's a big break. There's lots of stuff happening, and then it gets passed to him, and it just, all the energy gets sucked right out of the game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is about the guy.
Well, speaking of being sucked out of the game, we're going to take ourselves a short break. I know the look on your face that, the audio listeners can't see right now.
Right.
Tells all. I'm joined by Mike and Scott from the Dark Poutine podcast. You're listening to the C4 Canucks Hockey podcast on CanucksHockeyBlog.com and the Full Press Coverage Network.
Take hitting out of the game. You can't hit anymore, so don't do it.
The unsportsmanlike conduct, I want to get an explanation on that.
No kidding.
Because how do you get suspended for unsportsmanlike conduct?
Plus interference. There's no interference there. He had the puck.
Now, Madison never ever did that before. Now, why did he do it? And that because he was mad.
Well, your early favorite for the Calder Trophy, that's for sure. Elias Pettersson, you might even say your early favorite for the Hart Trophy.
Just to get back to your question, Elias is going to play plenty. He didn't play. He's going to get a lot of power play time. And, I'm concerned about our offense. We lost 200-point players, and we've got to find a way to score.
You said sucked.
I know. You should see some of the stuff that I say that come, like, it makes sense as it's coming out of my mouth, but then others hear it, and it's just not getting any better right now. This is why people subscribe to this podcast. I am sure of it. But no, I thought we'd kick this segment off by getting to know a little bit about the two of you in the podcast that you host. I've called it Dark Poutine, which, first and foremost, if there is a more Canadian name for a podcast, maybe say for like Canada Land, who I guess has a podcast or had a podcast.
Yeah, that they took the kind of the low road and just put Canada in the title.
Yeah, that doesn't. So they're disqualified. So Dark Poutine, you could be like a podcast on like financial service institutions, and it'd be like, oh, what a cool name. But no, why don't you guys tell us a little bit about Dark Poutine?
Well, I was into true crime ever since my grandmother introduced me to Max Haynes articles in the Chronicle Herald newspaper back in Nova Scotia. So I was just a true crime guy. I was into, like Scott also will tell you, he was into unsolved mysteries and American Justice with Bruce Curtis and like all those kind of true crime shows that were very early on, those kind of things.
Cold Case Files.
Yeah, I loved all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't until I heard, obviously, Serial that I thought, oh, there's a new way to deliver this thing, and maybe one day I can actually do this. So I started thinking, like, how can I eventually do a true crime podcast? And I came up with the name because somebody already had Canadian true crime. Like, somebody had Canadian true crime. She's an Australian, but she had Canadian true crime as a name. So I thought, okay, I need to come up with something that really embodies Canada. And so it's what's the most Canadian dish that you can possibly think of other than, a big tall glass of maple syrup? Poutine. And if we're going to talk about poutine, well, it's pretty dark what we're going to talk about. So it was that simple. Yeah. And Googling around and seeing if I can find a .com that existed with it, and nobody had it, so I picked it up. That's how the name was born. And then the Vulture magazine called it the most efficient podcast name on the planet.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
See, the name of your podcast, like if I say Dark Poutine and I asked someone to guess, I probably don't have to give them more than maybe 2 to figure out what it's about.
Right.
If I go and ask someone, tell me what the C4 podcast is about, I can assure you they're never going to get hockey. And if they do, they'll think it's about blowing franchises up or some silly stuff like that. Because in my bright mind, I thought that my original co-host, Clay, and myself being Chris, were going to have a Canucks commentary, and that the Chris and Clay's Canucks commentary became so difficult to roll off the tongue. We'll just call it C4 because it was this.
It's very
well. I mean, it makes sense when you explain it.
But that's the thing.
You have to explain it every single time.
So anyhow, no, so both of you had this desire to maybe get involved on sort of the podcasting side or true crime, had a fascination with it. I want to say you've been around for what, 2 years now? 3,
Yeah.
okay.
It's 3 years.
Yeah, because I will be the first one to admit I did not tune in from the get-go. I remember seeing, I think it might have been on Facebook.
Not many people did from the get-go. It was just Scott and I the first night.
Well, I mean, my first episode that I had, it was Clay's family and I think my sister. But I remember seeing either both of you or one of you sort of share on Facebook at the time, like, oh, hey, I've got this new podcast. I'm like, oh, I got to check it out. Because at that time I had been podcasting for a while, and I'm fascinated with anyone that I know that podcasts. 2 reasons. One, I want to be supportive, and 2, I want to rip off everything that they do well and do it myself.
Yeah,
right.
If only we did something well.
Well, I did not listen. Like the problem is that I had such limited time for podcasts that to get into the rotation was difficult, and I will be honest, I lost track of it. It wasn't until one of your away game episodes, and to sort of give our listeners some understanding, every so often you have an episode that you call an away game that is not completely true crime focused or Canadian true crime focused. It's to lighten the load a little. It was the one on, it was Swiss Air, the Swiss Air crash off of the East Coast.
Game, for
that
sure.
was, and was it an away game? I don't know. That was the episode that I listened to.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So the reason I think I thought it was an away game because it wasn't Canadian, but anyhow, I don't know.
It wasn't crime. It was a disaster. So
a disaster.
I get that.
Okay.
Anyway.
But yeah, I was the first episode, and first and foremost, great episode for me to get hooked on because I have this like fascination with aviation. And I'm like, oh, these two guys that I know, recorded this podcast, talked about it. And it was the first time I had heard a podcaster bring in like, the air traffic control clips and things like that, which I thought was so fascinating. Like, oh my goodness, maybe I could do that too. Cause I know I'm instantly trying to, squeeze you for all your podcast is worth. And I continued to listen.
Oh, thanks. I tried to get as much real sort of information that I can for each show. I want to be able to give listeners something that maybe they haven't heard before, or they haven't heard it in the context that we're going to give it. So, we're very lucky that we have a relationship with Chorus right now. So, they give us access to their global news archives. So I can get global news interviews from their archives, which are 60 years old. So, I wouldn't have had access to any of that had we not had this relationship. So I'm pretty grateful for that.
Yeah. And, the actually connection that C4 has to Dark Poutine is as you were joining Curious Cast, which is the Chorus network, CKNW Studios, where we were recording this show, kindly asked us to stop.
Oh, no.
Oh, really?
Why did we ask you to stop?
Well, so long story short, as those who listen to C4 know, Matt used to work for NW, and that sort of gave us access to their studio, the ability to record. And the relationship that we had with them was that we were providing them essentially sports commentary that they could go and slap a CKNW logo on without really costing them anything. The only cost was access to a studio, which was always empty. And so, we headed down to the Black Tower in downtown. We'd record an episode, we'd leave. And then when Matt had left NW, the program director at the time had said, no problem, just, give so-and-so a call who's on, they'll let you in. And essentially we got signed in. Well, when Curious Cast came to be, that's when Chorus sort of nationally started paying, I think, closer attention to podcasts. And, this local Vancouver dealio that was going on, and I'm sure there were other local things needed to sort of Yeah, I get it. They wanted to focus on a branded experience and be consistent in their approach. And so I blame Dark Poutine for us getting kicked out of NW.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, you're
Yeah.
welcome.
So it's totally that's why I'm, actually personally, I hold Scott most responsible, which is why anytime I comment in your Facebook community, the Yumber Yard, where I'm like, I talk very, highly of Mike, and I'm like, oh, the other guy, Scott.
Well, it's fair. Trust me, I know me. I've lived with me for 46 years. I get it. I get it.
I've read your podcast reviews too. Trust me, there's a lot of other people that feel the same way, it seems.
Right. It's true.
It's really true.
But you know what? Okay, here's the thing. I was going to do this podcast all on my own. I was going to do this all by myself, and I was terrified. I was terrified of talking into a mic all by myself, just sounding stupid and not having somebody to tell a story to. And Scott and I had a great relationship at that family business that we worked at, and we had talked about doing something together at some point. So once he was officially away from that family business, his any relationship with them had been gone. It was okay for me to finally ask him, hey, do you want to do this with me? And of course he said yes, because Scott's a super supportive guy. And people who don't understand his role, the ones who give us those crappy reviews, whatever, go crap in your hat, I say to them, because
that's the more polite version of what you use on your show.
Exactly. But Scott's there. He's there to support me, to support the show. And he does a fantastic job of it. And I wouldn't have anybody else do it. I just love you, buddy. And that is why it works.
And in regards to I legitimately and honestly, I take nothing personal from the comments and reviews people can try. I don't spend a lot of time reading them, more so just because I'm happy with what I do. I'm happy with what Mike does. I'm happy with the show. We have millions of listeners. So it's okay if somebody doesn't like me. It's okay if somebody hates that I say, absolutely. A lot. They can
say that actually.
But it's like, because on the flip side, I hear from people constantly talking about how, oh, I just love what's good. He's reacting like how I am reacting, and how the thing that 1% of people hate me for is the thing that 99% of people love me for. And so it's like, when I read the comments, or the reviews, I honestly chuckle, and because I'm like, yep, I do say that. You got it right on. Sorry you hate it. Like, no worries.
Reviews, so I just stopped. It's pointless because I get caught up in it. And
well, in fairness, saying you get like hundreds of reviews weekly. We get hundreds of reviews a century. So it's easier to read all of them. I was going to say, like, when it comes to your podcast, though, the chemistry the two of you have is what drew me in. Like, I'll be honest, true crime doesn't do it for me. In fact, some of the episodes that you record are so brutal. Like, I am listening to it and I'm emotionally like, I need to turn this off. I can't listen to this. Like, now that I'm a father, anytime it has to do with kids, those episodes are the hardest ones.
We have a hard time with kids, both of us. I'm not a dad, but I do have trouble talking about any time that a kid is involved in any kind of crime, even if it's just related to not the actual victim. I really have a tough time with it. And Scott will attest to the fact that I do a lot of sighing before I have to talk about a specific, really horrific thing that may have to do with children. I just happen to edit that out because our listeners don't need to hear about me mumbling about how terrible this thing is that I have to read that I just wrote.
Yeah.
It's very heavy stuff. It's very heavy stuff most of the time, and it's an odd balance of trying to be the levity in it, because you have to respect the families of the people you're talking about. It is so ingrained in us and so much in our brains. Like, it's not that we have to think about it. We're already aware of it, but having to constantly be aware of the fact that what if one of the family members is listening? I couldn't live with myself if I made a joke that negatively impacted a family member. Like, that's just terrible. So it's always a fine line of trying to figure out when should I be funny, when should I not, when should I just be listening, when should I just be reacting, when should I and what should I make a joke on. And so it's much easier now because of the amount of shows we've done. But for a long time, it was really challenging. Like, I would find myself, there's something I want to say and react, but then I'm just overthinking it. Like, oh, okay, how would the family? And I just tend to not say something because it's just, I could not imagine what it is like to be in the shoes of a victim and their families, and to think that something I say could hurt them. But yet my part is to be the cheese. I have to be light and funny. And so also trying to balance it with, okay, well, what can I say here that will be funny and not come off as disrespectful? Thankfully, the listeners constantly give us the positive feedback of that they consider us incredibly respectful and empathetic. And so that makes us feel fantastic.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
We do get a lot of emails. At least I do, from family members of some victims who have listened to the show and say thank you for doing it the way that we have. So, to me, that's the best kind of feedback, if it comes directly from a family member to say, okay, we're a little light at the beginning. We take you into the darkness, and then we set you free at the end with our silly Patreon shout outs and all that stuff. But
like when we had that West Edmonton Mall shooting, where the one surviving security guard, like, I remember he actually commented on Facebook, commented and thanked us and stuff, and that was just like, holy shit, to have somebody that directly involved in an episode, like surviving victim, thanking us and for the storytelling. Like, it's pretty powerful.
It makes it worthwhile. I mean, these stories that we tell aren't necessarily ones that are known nationally sometimes. A lot of them are. A lot of people will remember them. However, there are a few people who may not have ever heard of so-and-so that we're talking about at this point in time, this horrible crime that's more regional. So our whole idea is to bring Canada together by talking about crimes all across the country. So I know when I lived in Nova Scotia, I loved to hear my own hometown mentioned on the radio or on TV. I think we all do.
Yep. And Chris, you had mentioned earlier about like the chemistry, how it's genuine and stuff. That's something that I remember when Mike and I were first sitting down to talk about. Okay, I'll help you. Now let's do this. And I remember talking. And I've always been a very strong believer in the power of chemistry. I remember saying, and I said it a bunch of times. The show Top Gear. Anybody who's watched Top Gear, even if you don't like cars, you love the show because of the relationship of those three hosts, the dynamic and how genuine it is. That's what's infectious, and that's what has people love it. They've tried to remake it in different places. They tried to remake it in the US. I mean, it might still be going, and they made it in Australia. The exact same format, the exact same template. It's terrible. Because it's not those three hosts. It does everything that they're doing. Seems like it's a forced dynamic. It's a forced interaction. And people are very savvy of when something's contrived versus when something's genuine and real. And so we made sure that right from the inception that our relationship and our dynamic is genuine and is us, but to not try to fake who we are.
Yeah, we're really honest with each other too when it comes to, how we feel about stuff and all that kind of thing. And I think that's super important if you're going to have a relationship that you display in front of people continually.
Yep.
in any sort of format, I'm sure you have it with your other hosts that you have to have an affinity for each other, or at least a reason to pick on them.
Yeah. Well, and that's sort of what I was going to actually sort of segue to. But first and foremost, like, you're on the note of being respectful, your podcast is very respectful. Like, the chemistry is what's kept me tuning in. I actually enjoy what are Mike and Scott going to talk about next, more than maybe the topics. Because again, I'm not that sort of true crime aficionado. And that's what draws me in. And I find what you share respectful. I find it very informative. Often the episodes that I find resonate the most with me are, I'm going to use the term historical. It's more sort of like, I can't remember what the episode was, the recent one about the mine disaster. These are the olden times episodes of the ones, because it's history is my thing, right? Yeah. Well, I would imagine, because you talk about these topics. So there's a little bit of everything. And I wanted to also, share for Canucks fans specifically. If you're like, okay, you've been talking about this podcast quite a lot, and why would you bring two true crime podcasters onto a hockey podcast? Well, first and foremost, I asked the two of you if you could, because I wanted two people that could talk about an era that I remember. So thank you. Two, you're the most famous Canadians I know, and I think it gives our podcast a little cred to get the likes of. You're essentially the podcast Canadian equivalent to Ryan Reynolds. Right?
Oh, God.
Wow.
But the episode,
we're dreamy, Mike. Did you hear that? We're dreamy.
The episode you need to listen to is episode 76, the Vancouver Stanley Cup Riots, 1994 and 2011.
Oh yeah, those were so fun for both of us to do. I remember we talked about it very early on that was something that we were definitely going to cover one time. But because we're here in Vancouver, we wanted to be able to do it justice. So we waited until we sort of got our legs underneath us before we wanted to do it. So
yeah, it was, well, first and foremost, I can vouch that you actually taught me things I did not know, and I was around for both of those two riots. I appreciated the history on riots in Vancouver that you shared, because I learned quite a bit, right? Like that's actually what can at first can like, well, wait a minute, did I get the wrong episode? But this is the problem when I jump into episodes sometimes.
Yeah.
But it was so well done, so well put together, and it had me thinking back to specifically the 2011, right? Like, I was downtown and I walked through Granville in Georgia while this was happening. Like, I left the family business. We went and met up with some friends. I was in Gastown watching the game, having a wobbly pop or two, right? Like anyone, Canucks were going to win it.
Yeah.
And then they didn't. And so, the friends I was with, we stayed a little bit longer, right? Because we needed to, deal with our emotions with more of the wobbly pop. And on our way back, one of my friends, he lived on Vancouver East Side. Another one lived in North Shore. I lived in Richmond. So where's the most logical place to go downtown to say, see you later? Granville in Georgia. So we walked up.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it would have been, I guess it would have been Seymour or what have you. And there's like people, and there's like we saw smoke. We didn't know what it was about. Booms. We were maybe naive to think that everything was okay.
Yeah.
I remember going down the escalator to try to get on the Canal Line to Richmond, and it was before they had brought in the RT and Riot Squad, but like, there was just a mass of people. You moved where the mass went, and someone let off something in the station, Vancouver City Center, and the crowd suddenly moved the opposite direction. I fell down, got trampled, which was not fun. And I decided I needed to go somewhere safe. So where did I go? I went back down to the tower, where security refused to let me in until I can't remember. I'm not going to say her name simply because I, trying to be respectful of family business and them. But a supervisor who actually vouched for me and was working let me come into the building. I stayed there for about 45 minutes or so until things settled down and I could get transit out. Like, it was crazy to be down there.
I was working that night. I was on shift when that was all happening, and had to.
Oh wow!
I remember leaving a bit early because I'm just because I live in Surrey. It was just a great distance, and there was a lot of concerns about transit. There were a lot of concerns about that, and so I just said to the other soup on there, and, not right away. Like it was an hour or two into the riot, but I'm like, if transit shut down and people can't get into the city, I'm stuck. So I'm going to take off while I can still catch the train. And so I did, and I made it home. But I remember when I got home, I ended up feeling really guilty because I was like, well, shit, okay. Like a lot of our agents are also in the same situation, and I'm all like, I screw you all. And so I emailed or texted the soup who was working, like, hey, now that I'm at home and I have my car, send an email out to the floor that if anybody is having trouble getting to where they need to go, that I will come and drive them there. So,
oh, that's good to know, Scott, that you'll give us a lift when we need a lift.
Yeah.
No, that was a one-time offer.
Yeah, just what's the phone number all the listeners would like to know, just in case. Right?
No, they'll need a time machine back to 2011.
Yeah, but no, in that particular episode, I encourage all of our listeners to at least listen to that one, and you can determine whether or not Dark Bundesliga. I'd also recommend listening to other episodes. If there's one episode though that you knocked out of the park, the creme de la creme, episode 105. So an away game. It was everything to do with that Christmas Eve incident at Nakatomi Plaza.
Oh God, yeah, that was actually one of the scariest stories to tell because people were so involved with that, and there was so much damage that happened at Nakatomi, and I mean, John McClane being there was they were so lucky that they had this guy there. And
so many people forgot about the story. So many people forgot about the event. It was a while ago, and so there's a lot of younger people listening, and they were just blown away by this tragedy at Nakatomi Plaza that they had no idea.
Yeah, they were just so that was last year's Christmas episode, and we did get a lot of feedback about that episode.
I know. I saw that there were quite a few of your listeners that had either not heard of that incident or possibly remembered it. It was quite striking, but I'm glad that you covered it. For one reason or another, I find that podcasts try to stay away because of how incredulous that entire story is. I mean, if they haven't made a movie about it,
I hear it's in the works.
Michael Bay, if you're listening to our podcast,
that's got action movie written all over it.
It does.
Yeah, I think maybe get the Sylvester Stallone to star.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I'm thinking Jason Statham.
Oh, Statham would be really good in it.
Yeah, I can picture this kind of golden, older but yet still fit. Yeah, that's a great call.
He'd have to do an American accent though, so I don't know if he'd be able to pull that off.
It's different times, Mike. You can.
It's okay.
It's called acting, I guess.
Yeah. But segueing from the podcast, let's talk a little bit about more current times. So this past NHL season was obviously crazy for a variety of reasons. I mean, our entire year has been completely different for us, our generation. I know maybe not for the two of you, but I'm trying to think, it was a few weeks ago where on the episode you were talking about how you both had sort of found yourselves watching hockey again after having gone through a period where you weren't as interested. And I was like, man, that sounds like me. I think they're inside of my head, because when the Canucks went as far as they did in 2011, the entire 2012 season felt to me as just simply something that was in the way of what they were going to go and accomplish. And then the Vancouver Canucks proceeded to accomplish very little. And in subsequent seasons, it's just been going downhill. As our listeners will probably attest to, I am not the most positive person on this podcast. That said, to our earlier conversation about chemistry and being able to play a role, you may have, as a longtime listener, know I tend to play a role from time to time. I can assure you I was not happy with the Vancouver Canucks. So this season, my optimism has actually been true, because I started to get interested and then the pandemic occurred.
Yeah.
And part of, the struggle, and as again, listeners will attest, I wasn't maybe keen on hockey coming back, but it wasn't hockey, it was sports. I'm like, let's figure the pandemic out first. Let's not put someone into a position where they're put in harm's way. Let's follow what science is telling us. Sports, as much as it's nice to have back, let's wait a while. I'm glad it came back. I enjoyed watching hockey. I enjoyed watching the Canucks play. I set up my Budweiser red light again. I had to put new batteries into it. I was shouting, and I could tell that I was about 2 seconds ahead of one of my neighbors when the Canucks scored a goal based on when I cheered or he cheered. And then I noticed he stopped cheering, so I must have been ruining for him. But tell me, the two of you sort of said you were invested in hockey again. What was it? Was it just sort of pandemic related? I'm watching hockey and this is nice to have, or was there more to that?
I hadn't even really been watching for seasons now. I think a lot of it had to do with just my headspace in life. I'm very passionate, and especially with sports. The amount of remotes I've destroyed throughout my lifetime of watching hockey is countless. And so I get really emotionally invested into sports. And when the Canucks lose, it would ruin my next day. There's a lot of times when my whole demeanor and my whole mood would be substantially impacted by a victory or a loss of the Canucks. And I think I just got to a point where I'm like, I don't think I can emotionally commit to Canucks to hockey right now, because I would just watch it, and then when I do turn it on, I would just be like, there's nothing that is really making me feel excited about the fact that I'm watching it. And I got my sporting obsession is primarily mixed martial arts and UFC. It's kind of my new hockey, but I don't know exactly what had me tuning in after COVID for the Canucks. I think there was a large part of it where I was really intrigued about what is going to happen to a sporting season that was so interrupted for so long. I just had this feeling I have a feeling once they start this back up, it's almost a reset has happened. It's almost a new season. It's just starting off as the playoffs. And I really had that feeling I think could be some really interesting things happen. This could actually be fun, and just the whole dynamic of why they're playing and how they're playing. And so I just thought, what, let me give this a shot. Let me give this and I just remember right from the first game, I remember just being like, okay, I felt the passion in the team. I felt the passion in the sport. I just kind of felt like, oh, this is what I remember. This is what I love. And we were on a vacation in Whistler, and so I was just watching it on my laptop, and I was just, it brought me back to that excitement of, oh, there's something invested here.
For me, it's the new players. For me, it's the new players, this new spate of players, like the fact that Alexander Edler is the old timer on the team. Yeah. I remember when he started. Yeah. And now we've got guys like Pettersson. Holy crap! I could watch that guy play all day, every day. He's a fantastic player, and he's going to be a force to be reckoned with, I think, as he gets a little size to him. He's still a pretty young guy, so who knows what's going to happen, but he's sort of starting off the same way the Sedins did, but I think we got ripped off because I thought Swedes always came in pairs. I don't know how that worked, but we've got one. Where's Elias's brother? Yeah. It's got to be somewhere.
Well, so maybe the Vancouver Canucks have gotten smart. You don't bring both of the players out at the same time. You start one, you bring another one along so that you always have at least one of them as opposed to when both of them leave at the same time and suddenly you're up a creek. Yeah.
Yeah, you're at sea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to the point that you raise about the likes of an Elias Pettersson or Quinn Hughes,
he's fantastic. Yeah.
It's been a long time since the Canucks had a young core that was sort of this good this early. Like even the Sedins, they were good, but they came into the West Coast Express era. They didn't get that opportunity to shine, and it took them a while to sort of find their place in the game. But once they did, I often joke, I could have skated with the Sedins and I would have probably got a few goals. All they needed to do is park me in front of the net and they just bounce things off of me.
Like Marcus used to do.
Like how many people were just throwing in with them and then did great.
Yeah. So I that's what sparks interest in me. Like I often get made fun of because I'll say I prefer to watch an exciting loss than a boring win. Now, some of that is, growing up in the 80s where essentially if the game didn't end 9-8, it wasn't a good game.
Yeah.
But it's about that emotional connection. Like I like good, tight games, but it needs to be exciting. If it's boring, I'm just like, there was a playoff game in 2011, game 1 against the Nashville Predators. I was in the rink for that game. And I spent more time talking to who I was with than I did watching a Canucks playoff game because the energy wasn't there or the investment wasn't there.
Suck the energy out of it by clogging up the neutral zone, and you can't get in to do anything. They can't get anything going. What a horrible game.
Yeah, and that's for me. That's what I disliked. And so now seeing the much more exciting, play style of these younger players. Like I have optimism. True, I'm maybe not as optimistic about the management side of the business, but there's a reason why I'm not a GM in the NHL. Oh man. Well, I mean, it is, as I sort of alluded to at the start of the episode, a little bit of a time continuity issue for us. We're currently recording just after the NHL draft, before NHL free agency. So there could be some crazy stuff. Like if for some reason the crazy happens and Pettersson and Quinn Hughes are no longer Vancouver Canucks, many apologies.
I can't see that happening, but
oh boy,
there's a lot of things that I haven't seen happening that happened.
Wayne Gretzky got traded, so
exactly. It's the odd thing though is that when you look at the Canuck teams, when you look at 1994 and 2011, they weren't really young teams. We haven't had a lot of our success based around young teams. They were fairly well-seasoned players for the most part, with some young players interspersed in there.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've really seen a rebuild like the one that we're seeing.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Vancouver Canucks in the 80s really never got built. The team that was put together sort of in the early 90s was more a combination of good young players, but the difficulty the Canucks had is utilizing them. When Pat Quinn came in and started to sort of put together the team that we saw in 94, again, they overachieved, but they were a bunch of pieces that figured out how to play the game. That might have been the youngest successful roster that I can recall, but even then, success is measured by how they did in the playoffs, not how they did during the regular season. And in turn, they had some strong veteran, presence in the likes of, Babbage and Didick, and I think it was Momesso. I mean,
I've got a good mustache, but I'm never going to have one as good as Dave Babbage.
Oh, Dave's. So actually, Dave Babbage or Harold Sneps, who wore the stash better?
Oh, well, that's a pretty good stash too.
I mean, and if we go outside of Vancouver, throw in a little Lanny McDonald there, and
oh my gosh,
he's the mustache god of hockey, though.
Neil Sheehy.
Oh, we're currently getting into a place that our listeners are probably like, who are these guys that they're talking about? So.
Well, when I was a boy, I saw these young men. Come on, where's my pudding?
Oh man, well, thank you for allowing me to walk down memory lane. I mean, the two of you joining it has made that possible. We've gone a lot longer than I had actually expected. I think I told you guys I'd take maybe 30, 45 minutes of your time. And if I'm doing the math correctly, we're probably pushing an hour here.
Oh, yeah.
So as you can see, that's pretty, that's on point. With this podcast, we say it's going to be 30 and like 2 hours later, we're done. So next time you come back.
That's why Mike has editing capabilities and of our show, so that he can truncate me as much as necessary.
Otherwise, we'd be talking about Scott's childhood, and people would forget what the show was about.
7-hour-long episodes.
Yeah, but I know a whole lot more, like New West and other such areas, right?
Oh my goodness!
No, I mean it's good fun to obviously get people on, but the two of you have been great. I have enjoyed this episode. I enjoy a lot of our episodes, but I always enjoy Memory Lane. Reminiscing is always good.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I didn't even bring up the fact that I used to have a Peter Zezel hockey stick.
Oh boy!
So that I got from Peter Zezel in a Canucks dressing room post game.
Best Canucks jersey. Before we go,
best jersey? Oh, it's for me, it's the skate. It's the white skate.
Scott?
Oh, it's the ugly sweater, the ugly jersey that I have. It's that the flying V, the ugly orange, and oh god, it's so disgusting that it's amazing.
Is it?
I got to go back to the original. I like the rink and the stick.
Like, okay, are you talking like OG rink and stick or sort of the new modern rink and stick?
I kind of like the modern rink and stick, to tell you.
Yeah, and that's if I had to choose, I'd pick modern. I feel that they freshened it up in all the right places.
Yeah.
Man.
Wish I could say the same about me.
Yeah, well, there's some things you just can't fix, Scott.
This is true.
Yeah, but no, I mean, if you are looking for the two of you, where might our listeners find you first and foremost?
Well, any podcatcher, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify. Just Google Dark Poutine or go to darkpoutine.com. And you will find us. I have, if you click on episodes at the top of the Dark Poutine page, you can just scroll through all the episodes and pick one that you like. And if you want to listen to that Stanley Cup episode, it's 76.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I might mention, and that's because, we have a Discord community for our podcast. Do you still have your Discord community? Is that still a thing?
I don't think I've logged in there.
Yeah,
maybe.
I have no idea.
I've been writing a book, so I had no time to do that kind of stuff. And now I've taken the last 2 weeks off, so I'll be getting back into that kind of thing pretty soon.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask is I was actually going to direct our listeners, if they're interested in seeing more about the community, is that supporters of your show get access to the Umber Yard, which has its own backstory that you have to learn by listening to the podcast or jumping into it. I'm not going to spoil it for you. And then since then, there are many other communities. Like I'm a member of, I think it's the Games Room.
Yep.
That's one that I'm a member of. It's about gaming, where right now the conversation generally is about Animal Crossing Horizons all the time.
Because I'm obsessed with it currently.
There's I'm trying to think, what's the other? There's
a Yum Yum Bus.
Oh, the food one, yeah.
Food, and then there's the Animal Barn, the Barnyard. That's right, and then the Craft Barn.
Craft Barn. Yeah, that was the one I was trying to think of.
I'm surprised Chris isn't all over the Craft Barn.
Yeah, he looks like a big knitter.
Oh yeah, you should see me. Hey, I just signed up for a TikTok account, so that's what I'm going to be doing. Is I'm going to be knitting on TikTok.
Whoa, just powerful stuff.
Yeah,
I predict tens of followers.
Tens and tens. Well, that is very optimistic.
At least 20.
You know what? But if I really want to go viral, I'm going to go and find a Fleetwood Mac track, and I'm going to, lip sync while knitting on TikTok, and that's where it's.
Thunder it's raining.
Yeah. See, all these ideas, I got to get you on more often. We'll have to get you back on again for future episodes so we can reminisce a little more. Sure. Like Canucks history is long enough, and obviously I need an excuse to talk about it. You two would be my enablers.
It will be after a cup win.
So when this becomes like, the granddad C4 podcast that my kid takes over, and she'll have us back.
There you go.
Yeah.
Or
I don't think I'm.
hopefully sooner than that.
Scott will still be talking about pudding.
Yeah.
Andy
Oh,
Westminster.
Yeah, no Westminster. But as Mike said, if you're looking for the podcast Dark Poutine, I got the place to go, audio podcatcher. Do yourself a favor when you tune in, grab yourself a double and then a Nanaimo bar, because it's going to be time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
Yum, yum, yum.
Exactly.
See, I got to do it this time.
How do you feel about that?
I hated it.
If I had a drop some loons or the the essentially first bar of Canada from the whatever horn it is down at Canada Place,
Heritage horn.
Thank you. Yeah. I was thinking, how deep do I go and actually expropriate your podcast material for my own benefit? And I just figured I'd take it.
I was gonna say, when you said heritage horns, I was gonna say that's what I call my penis.
Well, that episode is pretty much done. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. I'm sure there's other Canucks podcasts.
That was Scott Hemingway that said that.
But if you're looking for more of C4, you know where to find us. C4podcast.com is the easiest way to go. You can find us in every podcatcher, as probably you can find Dark Poutine. The difference is you have to search hard for us, not so hard for them. But on behalf of the Missing in Action, but I'm sure tuning in after the fact, Matt Lee at Matt_61, Anna Forsyth at A4603, Adam Ovenel Carter at Adam of FOC, and myself, Chris at Lightforce. Guess what, y'all? We out.